The bell of Notre Dame rang out across Paris. The year is 1487, and life was good for a young doctor named Gilles de Corbel. He earned his medical degree from the University of Paris, and was living the life of an up-and-coming physician. But then everything changed when he got a visit from one of his patients. The man who stood before him was Jean, a tailor by trade, and he was in desperate need of help. Jean explained to Dr. Corbel that he had visited another physician for a series of ailments, but the other doctor had essentially told him that he was making it all up. In fact, the doctor gave Jean a little more than that, calling him a hypochondriac, and telling him that his complaints were nothing but the work of the devil, and that wasn't the first time this had happened. The list of symptoms that plagued Jean was serious. It included bouts of uncontrollable laughter, fevers, black spots on the skin, convulsions, and even the sensation of bugs crawling under his skin. The other doctors apparently couldn't find anything wrong with him, and they recommended a change of scenery as a cure for what they thought were psychological problems. Dr. Corbel sympathized with Jean and wanted to help him, but he also didn't want to anger the powerful medical community by going against them. There was, however, something about Jean's ailments that bothered him. After listening to Jean's story, he agreed to take the man in as a patient and try to figure out what was really wrong with him. But after trying every treatment in his repertoire, Dr. Corbet could find nothing physically wrong with Jean. This led him to believe that there must be some sort of physiological cause for the man's symptoms. Unfortunately, he didn't know where to look for such a thing. So Jean stayed in Dr. Corbet's house for almost 2 years while the physician tried his best to help him. Then the breakthrough came in the middle of the night. Dr. Corbet awoke suddenly from a deep sleep to the sound of violent laughter coming from Jean's room. As he rushed over to investigate, he noticed that there were also strange sounds coming from the man's mouth, which seemed to be emitting these small clicking noises. When Dr. Corbet examined Jean's mouth, he found the answer he'd been looking for. Though he didn't have the proper equipment to do so, he was able to feel small, hard objects lodged between Jean's teeth. His mind raced as he realized what they must be. Could it really be? Had Jean eaten insects or some kind of rodent? Or perhaps the poor man had been biting off of his own fingers during his sleepwalking episodes, as he worked feverishly to pull the objects from Jean's mouth. His mind raced to the writings of ancient Roman philosopher Pliny the Elder, who wrote about a type of madness that caused people to eat their own flesh. What if this was similar? In the end, he was able to extract only a few of the objects from Jean's mouth, and they looked like pieces of bone to him. However, he still couldn't be sure what exactly they were until he brought them back to the university to show his colleagues. Under the microscope, they appeared to be fragments of ivory, and it hit him. They weren't bone at all. These must have come from human teeth. He rushed back to his patient's room to examine Jean's mouth again. And this time he felt around with his finger and found many more of the small ivory fragments stuck between the man's teeth. Relief flooded Dr. Corbet's body as he finally understood what was causing Jean's ailments. But now, he needed to find a way to treat the man without offending the medical establishment once again. He devised a plan, but it would require some subtlety. Dr. Corbet invited his fellow physicians to his home to observe Jean's condition. He waited until they were all present before asking his patient to open wide. When they saw the fragments of teeth in his mouth, his fellow physicians were shocked, quickly offered Jean treatment, and this time it was Dr. Corbet who got to be the hero. However, no one was quite sure how to remove the offending material from Jean's mouth. Corbet suggested that they try pulling the teeth out with forceps, but they failed to remove the fragments. Next, he suggested grinding them down, but that proved unsuccessful as well. Still, they tried using fire to burn away the fragments, but that ended up setting Jean's hair aflame and nearly killing him. In the end, Dr. Corbet hit upon the idea of using a special instrument called a ventus to suck the particles out of Jean's mouth. The strategy paid off, and Jean was cured of his mysterious illness. Not only that, but Corbet became a hero of the medical community and was rewarded with the title of personal physician. 2. King Charles VIII of France. Sadly, Jean died a few months later. At the request of the king, Dr. Corbet performed an autopsy on the man, but he was unable to find any evidence of disease or illness. Even stranger, as Dr. Corbet studied Jean's remains, he realized that the man had lost most of his teeth, including those found in his mouth. This made him wonder how on earth did Jean eat or speak without them. Perhaps even stranger is that Dr. Corbet never forgot about his unusual patient. He continued to study the case, eventually publishing a book about it in 1521. nearly 30 years after Jean's death. In it, he theorized that Jean's illness was caused by a parasite, something that could explain the progression of the disease and the root of the physical manifestations. However, he wasn't quite correct. Today we know that Jean suffered from a disorder known as pica, which causes people to crave non-nutritional substances. For Jean, the substance was human bone. But why did this happen? We don't know. What we do know is that people who suffer from pica often have nutritional deficiencies, and that may have been the case with Jean. People suffering from pica often consume dirt, which can make sense because it doesn't spoil or go bad, and it's easy to hide in plain sight. However, in Jean's case, he ate the teeth of other people. This makes Dr. Corbett the first person ever to describe this particular variant of the disorder. It may seem hard to believe today, but Dr. Corbett was actually criticized for describing the case of a man who ate human teeth. At the time, cannibalism was illegal and immoral in Europe. That's why Dr. Corbett went to great lengths to hide the true nature of his patient's ailment. After all, if Jean's condition was caused by a parasite, then it could theoretically affect anyone. Imagine the chaos that would ensue if people knew someone close to them might randomly chomp down on their own teeth. While Dr. Corbett was praised for curing Jean, he was also criticized for his theory that parasites could cause illness. At the time, the prevailing belief was that diseases were caused by imbalances of the four humors: blood, phlegm, black, and yellow bile. This theory had been around since the days of ancient Greece and held sway over physicians for centuries. However, Dr. Corbett was adamant that something else was responsible for Jean's illness. He described how he had examined Jean's excrement and found no trace of worms, nor did he find any in the dead man during his autopsy. Corbett was ahead of his time, and unfortunately, he wouldn't live to see his ideas vindicated. He died of a plague epidemic in 1505. Just as the scientific community was starting to accept the idea that microscopic organisms could cause illness. Ironically, this was not the first time he'd contracted the disease. In fact, he treated one of the first victims of the plague in Paris and survived. Dr. Corbett was fortunate to have a life somewhat similar to our own today. Thanks to the internet, we are constantly bombarded with medical advice. Just like Dr. Corbett, it can be hard to separate facts from fiction, especially when it comes to serious topics like your health. If you've watched this far, thanks so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed learning about this strange case of a man who ate his own teeth. If you want to learn more about what causes a rare illness, check out the next video in the series, which looks at a girl whose body produced its own poison.